Welcome to Fans of the Forge. I'm Chris. To my left,
It's Sean.
And to my right,
Teresa.
And today we have a special guest joining us. We have Ashé Cravenock. Is that how you say your name?
Yeah, Cravenock.
Cravenock, great. And you may know him as this past week's winner of Forged in Fire for the Sengese episode. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to talk to you about this, and we'll get right into it. I guess.
Yeah,
We'll
why
just
not?
hop right into everything here. So, Season 5, Episode 25, the Sengese. Let's make a quick note here. Our DVR has been telling us different numbers than what the Wikipedia numbers are for episodes, so we may be off by one number. If we are, we apologize.
Well, there was an episode 0.
There was an Episode 0.
That came out after episode 1?
No, it was
before. Okay.
Either way, it was the first episode of the season, but it was marked episode 0. But Wikipedia says it's episode 1, so everything is shifted by 1. We're going to call this one episode 25.
That's what I saw, so.
Perfect. Okay.
Good.
So, getting right down to business here, our contestants, we had John, who's a part-time bladesmith with 3 years experience. He was all about that Viking aesthetic.
Yeah.
He lived it, and it was a cool look. And then we had Ashé. You had full-time experience of 5 years, correct?
Something like that. It's been patchy, but that's about right.
Okay. And you mentioned you were all about dragons and the fantasy aspect, right?
Yeah, I was really fascinated by kind of the medieval time period when I was young, and it really spurred me to want to build weapons and kind of live that kind of lifestyle. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily happened, but we definitely try to live off the land and kind of do things the older way.
Speaking of the older way, did you have a chicken nearby?
Yeah.
I have a few. Come here, Pita. Come here.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
This is the good luck chicken. You can eat. She's camera shy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny.
Here you go. I'm going to torture you.
Continuing on, we had Jeff. Jeff was what I think we all tend to call the ringer for the episode, right? He had full-time experience of 30 years, and this guy was like, I always wanted to be a wizard, and he was like kind of looking the part with the glasses and the long beard, which kudos to my beard brother, but it was an interesting look for sure. And then, Levi had a part-time experience of 5 years, and as we're watching this, Teresa and I were watching, and Teresa pointed out the Viking, the dragons, the wizard, and then I'm like, it's the handlebar fucking mustache now.
Yeah.
And we also find out some interesting information pretty early on that Levi has 9 kids, which, wow, that's...
We have 2, and it's tough.
Yeah, it's a feet.
Yeah,
It's definitely a feat.
We've all seen the meme. He did cure Tiny Tang syndrome.
Yes.
Pretty apparent.
Oh, yes. So, let's get into our picks. Interestingly enough, we all had the same picks this week. We all chose the ringer, Jeff, as our main person to win. And we actually all chose Ashé as our underdog to win. And
That's about how I felt going into it.
so, spoiler alert for the rest of the episode, because obviously we have him on. He's the champion for this week. I'm just going to say right now, we all got the underdog points. Underdogs are worth 2 points in our system. So we were all feeling pretty good when this episode ended. Last week's episode, not so much, but we'll get into that one in our next wrap-up. But anyway, moving forward, round 1. Will Willis comes out, and he's got a bucket, and he's talking about arts and crafts, and then he just dumps scissors all over the table. So what's going on through your head when you see all these scissors just come pouring out?
Well, first of all, I'm thinking that I've never made Damascus before. Just starting off, I have no idea how I'm going to put scissors together. They've got bevels, multiple bevels, and then kind of drop-offs, and they're covered in paint. It's it's pretty nerve-wracking. Just seeing that going straight into it, I'm pretty much feeling like, okay, I might not even make a billet. But, well, I guess it worked.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of doing a canister. And then when I think Jay said, yeah, it'd be easy to do a canister, I'm like, yeah, duh, no kidding. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I can't believe I just, like, spaced on that. But and then everyone does canister, and that's the way to do it for this. Yeah.
My first idea was, like, could I weld them and stack them up and then just make, like, standard Damascus? But the bevels just weren't going to work for it. Oh. So I ended up going the canoe route, and I'm glad I did.
Well, as we'll get into, you had a little neat trick there that did you well. So moving forward, the specs for this round, the blade had to be between 12 and 15 inches. It had to have at least 6 inches of serrations included on the blade, and you needed to have a through tang. Mm-hmm. So, John went forward with his canoe canister Damascus. He did not use any liquid paper, which was... The judges were like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
There might be some benefit to, you don't have to use it if you can grind off the softer metal after the fact. And when he was going through his first 3 hours, his was more of a serration than it was. It wasn't a serration. It was more of a saw rather than the serration that was required. And then we came to Ashé. So, your neat trick, the paper towel in the canoe canister was... Everyone was like, what is he doing? And I think a lot of people were pretty skeptical that was going to work as well as it did. Now, had you'd never done canister, you said, so what prompted you to even try the paper towel?
Well, there was a little bit that wasn't really touched on in the episode that... So first of all, I put the liquid paper into my canister, and I was just putting my scissor blades in, and then realized, liquid paper is wet and it sticks to scissor blades. So I got paper and whiteout over everything. Like, my steel was a mess. And I ran over to the pantry to get paper towels to clean everything off, and was like scrubbing it for 10 minutes. And I had paper towels stuck to my hands, and I was just trying to like be able to work. And I didn't want to wait for the whiteout to dry the second time because I had already wasted enough time. So I was like, screw it. I know that you're not supposed to have much oxygen in a canister anyhow, so I'll burn it out with a paper towel and save myself some time. But it was definitely a panic move. There was not much thought behind it.
Well, it was lucky, and it was also possibly really innovative. Like, everybody on after that was like, that is like a quick release canister.
Yeah, I mean, that can came right off. As soon as you took it to the press, it just opened right up. I was like, wow. And then it just peeled right off. And
you might have started a new thing.
It's a revolution, man.
Well, yay.
So the other note that we had for you was you did 6 quenches to get the hardness on that thing. And I know Jay made a comment later on that you did 5 too many. Obviously, you were having the hardness issue. You just couldn't get it quite hard enough with the heat treating. So,
what was it, hardness, or just it had a warp in it, right? Also,
it was a combination of the two.
Okay.
And I can just see the dick jokes going for this episode. But the forges that they have there are cranked all the way up. Mm-hmm. And I tried to adjust them at one point, but it was just kind of fiddling with it, and it wasn't really working. So I kind of just left it. But my steel was getting kind of yellowish white on the outside, but not quite to quenching temperature on the inside yet. So it was an uneven heat. And when I'd quench, you wouldn't get quite hard. And it would also tend to kink in one direction or another. There was one point where I was like putting fire brick on top of it on the floor and jumping on it, trying to get it breaking out. It just was not working for me.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sure that was like super stressful, especially it's right at the end of the round. You know you got to get this thing turned in. And obviously you pulled it out. So we'll go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, they never really show you even trying to straighten. I'm like, well, he's got to do something. Like, you can't just keep putting it in for a quench and expecting it to just go straight. But You know, we know
Yeah,
how they leave stuff out. So
yeah, lots of tinking in between.
Mhm.
But yeah, never had that much trouble quenching before. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it took me a full half hour to get the blade quenched.
Ooh,
yeah.
that is rough. But moving forward, Jeff, he did a canister Damascus. Everybody did canister Damascus. His was shooting a hell of a lot of sparks, though. And then he turned it over, and the sparks stopped.
Yeah, there you go.
It was just like...
It seems like wherever the hole was when he turned
Yeah.
it was like
He
now
covered
on
it
the
up.
bottom and plugged.
Yeah. So, in the end, he had a good amount of difficulty trying to get the can off, so he didn't even bother like taking it off, kept it on, and formed the billet with it on there. And then Levi, they showed him removing all the coating from the blades. Like, it's hard to tell if other people did as well, like you or the other contestants.
Yeah, I know I ground off the steel as well as I could, but I didn't see anyone else doing it. So I think it was probably me and Levi, and I think John burnt his coating off in the forge for.
Oh.
Okay. So then Levi also did the canister Damascus. His can welded to the billet as well, so he kept his can on. And he did take a second to pray and ask God that his blade is used for good. And Will Willis was a little confused. Thought he was
Yeah.
maybe
Passing out
or something, and then realized what was happening in front of him. And hey, it also worked out pretty well for him. So
Well, I don't know if not to get on him, but like I don't think he had to pray that the blade was going to be used for good. It's on a show, right? They're not going out and attacking people with it.
maybe it's more of a mantra sort of thing.
I think
or
it's
like
just
a
part of
personal-
his routine.
Yeah, like a routine.
Yeah. I mean, better than some serial killer getting a hold of it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, just put that one in the bank.
What do they do with the blades that you guys make? Do you know? Or can you not tell us?
From what I heard, they just put them into storage somewhere. But I think that for legal reasons, they have to be kept and considered movie props to be allowed in the state.
Oh,
Is
okay.
what I've heard, but I've not heard that from any authority. So
Okay.
just
That would make
speculation.
sense.
So, for judging of this round, John, they commented that his was lacking in refinement. He had more of a bevel than a point. His tang was pretty indistinguishable from the rest of the knife, and his serrations were more just teeth that weren't connected the way they should have been. Ashé, your judging was that there was pointed serrations, and the many quenches that you had to do to get this thing hardened and ready to go may affect the grain structure of the blade, but otherwise not really too bad of a judging for, I would think, right? Jeff, his was weighty, is warped. His was much more like a sawback rather than having serrations. And then Levi, while his did have a lot of mass to it, he had perfect serrations, but he did suffer from tiny tang syndrome.
Yeah.
And as we know, you moved on to the next round, and John was the one who got the boot, just because of the four of them, his was the least defined blade.
Yes. And I do remember they did file check all of them, and I think that part of that was also that John's canister was still on in some places, so there was soft steel mixed in with the hard steel.
Oh.
And I think that was one of the main points that kind of set it on, but I don't remember them putting the stew into the episode there, which was kind of interesting.
I think they maybe want to make it seem closer than it was, perhaps. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I can just tell you that that's too much editing for me, so I'm gonna judge the editor on that one.
Yeah. All right.
We move on to round two.
Moving on to round two. So, you guys have to put handles on your blades and also attach a D-guard. So that kind of was a little unexpected. What'd you think when you heard that you had to add this D-guard to your blade?
I was kind of considering doing a D-guard already, which is kind of funny. I was guessing as to what they were going to throw at us as the kind of mix-up in the second round, and I was expecting either a cast pummel or D guard, since they made the specific through tang, which
Right.
do not do through tangs for a reason, and was not happy about that. But I was heavily considering it, and so at least I was somewhat mentally prepared, though it definitely showed that I had not done it before.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, at least you weren't caught off guard so much then, since you were kind of going with that.
Yeah.
It shows you're going for a burn through, which historically on a show is kind of a crazy idea. And
Judges cringe a lot when
Yeah.
somebody goes for a burn through,
but
it seems.
not so much this time, although they do mention that they wish you had taken some mass out of your tang to make it a little bit easier to do the burn through. So how hard was it to do a burn through? Is that something you normally do?
When I do a through tang, I typically drill as close as I can and then burn through the rest of the way, which is what I ended up doing on this. Though the first time that it wasn't really shown, I did not drill nearly enough and was like burning through it forever, and it wasn't really working. And then I went back and just drilled a little bit more, and it worked like a charm. So
Nice.
it was really just my inexperience with certain processes kind of catching up to me, and losing time really was the main one, which did bite me with that back end in the testing.
Right. And then you took a piece of brass for the D guard. You heat it up, you're hammering it, it breaks. There was some time left. Were you kind of getting a little worried that you had to go back and kind of do this whole process again?
Weirdly enough, I actually didn't get too stressed out by the brass breaking there, though everything else was like making me crazy at the time. I just cut another one out, and I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit more, having messed up a little bit on the first one, learning from my errors there, and used the acetylene torch instead of a blowtorch for the bending, and it worked a lot better.
Okay, cool. Moving on to Jeff. He had kind of had a unique technique. He wrapped his tang with Teflon tape. Then he put some epoxy in his handle and the hole, create an impression for the tang in the handle, and that seemed to kind of work for him. And then he doesn't really address his serrations.
Yeah.
He just kind of leaves them. He's kind of run out of time. He just kind of says, I'm just going to kind of roll it. So, that's what happens sometimes. You got to cut corners in some areas. In some areas, you just kind of go for it.
Yeah.
And then Levi, he reinforces his tang, cuts some angle iron, kind of shapes it, welds it. So that was a good move. And then he was shaping his handle independently of the blade. But he made it happen. He made it work.
Well, yeah, it was just because of the design of the handle and the tang allowed for him to be able to shape everything without having to have the blade inserted yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually probably made it a little easier to not have that extra blade mass there when you're trying to maneuver it around and get in on the belt sander.
Right, and then
Yeah,
he was using brass also, and he just kind of muscled it. He just pulled it, and then boom, D-guard. I was like, okay.
Yeah,
So.
seeing him do that on the show afterwards, I felt very stupid for doing it the way I did.
All right, so then we move on to judging, and for the strength test, the Jay Nielsen pain train, the ice block chop. So he's going to whack these blades into blocks of ice 10 times. So, Ashé, your blade held up nicely. The epoxy lifted kind of at the end of the guard. But overall, did a good job. Jeff, his blade held up. His handle was a bit big, but shaped well, so it still worked out. He did a pretty good job. And Levi, he had a nice shape, good serrations. His blade did take a bend. And top of his guard dug into his knuckle there, and it showed even before the testing it was pretty narrow. But he just kind of had to roll with it at that point, before testing. Couldn't do much about that.
You never want to see the Jay Nielsen reaction of being hurt, because that's usually a bad sign that you're going to be going. So you get a little nervous when you see that.
Right. And moving on to the sharpness test, they had an interesting melon drop slice. So Dave is going to saw through the piece of rope, drop in the melon, and he's going to whack it. Okay. So.
A different version of a test they do.
Yeah. Right.
Saw the rope, the thing falls,
right,
swing at it.
You know.
Yeah.
So Ashé, you had some nice serrations, back and forth, cuts the rope, drops the melon, your blade goes right through it. Jeff, his was a little bit different story. His blade really struggled to cut through the rope. It was kind of sawing through it. Eventually does cut through, and his edge is great with the melon. And then move on to Levi. He had some killer serrations, one cut, one pull right through it, and then he cut right through the melon. And unfortunately, Jeff got the boot because of those saw teeth versus the serrations. And so then it's off to the final round.
I've never known so much about saw teeth versus serrations.
Right.
Yeah.
As someone who just
Good
uses a
knowledge,
knife
though.
to eat with.
Right.
I am so glad I fixed my old snaggletooth in the second round. Otherwise, a very different story.
So then we go round 3, the Sengese. How do you say the name of that blade? Is that right?
I've been saying Sengese. I think, right? But
so it was an African throwing knife. What?
Oh no, I'm very Italian, so I just think Sengese.
that they didn't put any of that in, but I was calling it the Sanguini the whole time.
Okay, so it's an African throwing knife from Central Africa. Double-edged blade, curved shape resembling the letter F, and could have a throwing range of up to 60 feet.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
They said that thing has a lethal throwing range of 60 feet. Like, that's pretty badass.
I could totally see it. That kind of center part really has all the weight in it, so it makes an amazing balance. Like, I could see how that thing would just rotate forever.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
It was pretty fun to play with.
Nowadays, it's used for ceremonial purposes. Not so much throwing at people anymore. Has a sharpened spike at the junction of the upper and lower curves, and it's double-edged on the upper curve. So.
And they didn't show Will rattling off all of the other parameters, but and they didn't show my struggle with it. But I spent all of day 3 trying to get one parameter to work, because I think there was a total of 4 length requirements, like between the middle and the tip, and the tip and the back, the tip and the pommel, and it was crazy. The parameters were the hardest part for me of the whole thing, for sure.
Yeah, they didn't say anything about parameters.
No. And with a weirdly or oddly shaped weapon, that's kind of a pain to have to be very specific with it when you're fighting all these weird angles and stuff.
Yeah, well, and each one affects the other one, so if one's in, the other one's going to be out. And it was interesting. Going into the whole thing, I was hoping for 2 things. No ice chop, and I'm so glad that they already did the hungamunga. And, of course, this is what I get.
Yeah.
So they started at Levy's. I knew I would do it. Levi. At his forge. On the first day, he decided that he was going to go with a snake theme, using a cable Damascus in a coal forge. Day 3 was when he went to do the quench. There was no ping, nothing explodes, and his foot didn't fall off, so yay, and all counts. And then on day 5 was when he was doing the fit and finish, using a leather weave handle and a snakehead pommel.
The snakehead was badass looking.
Yeah, that was really cool.
It was on the way back in the airport. We ended up in the on the same flight getting into the Connecticut area, and he just showed me a picture on his phone of just the snakehead pommel. I was like, oh man, I lost. It was just spot on.
So then they showed your home forge, where on day 1 you were working on shaping the blade. peels like a banana from a single piece of sheet steel or single piece of steel. That's how we described it when we saw how you were approaching this project with your propane forge.
Which was pretty cool, I gotta say. Like, you had that cut down there, and then you just peel that thing the way you need it to go. That was a pretty awesome method, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it ended up working out pretty well, and it's kind of a fun way of doing it. You get to heat up steel and then just ooga booga it the rest of the day.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah.
Yep.
So then on the third day was when they came back to you for grinding, flattening, heat treating. Used the coal forge to do the heat treat. So you have two forges then, the propane and the coal.
Charcoal, actually. It's a little bit different. It works similarly, but can get a little bit hotter if the charcoal is made of the right wood.
Okay.
And it's really great for adding carbon back into your blade that you lose while forging.
It's interesting that you said it gets hotter because then your steel melted and you had to start over.
Yeah. Yep.
But you spent day 4 working on the second blade and used a tree to create the shape. That was pretty cool. You just had the tree lying around, or did you drag it over when you had to make a curved shape?
I was trying to get that curve right, and I just told my home forge producer, like, hang on a second, I got to go visit the wood pile, and then came back carrying half a pine tree. And
Nice.
It worked pretty well.
Yeah.
And then on day 5 was your fit and finish, where you made a hemp weave handle.
Yes.
So then we get back to the studio for the judging. Chris does a time check, as he tends to do at this point.
So what that means is I look at how much time is left on the episode, and if it's like 5 minutes, I know there was a catastrophic failure for sure, like early on. This one, I wasn't thinking there was, because it was about 8.
There was time.
There was 8 to 10 minutes left, and so it was like, all right, that's reasonable. This could go the whole way.
No, not all about you.
Not
I am
camera
a
shy.
very nosy dog.
So for the kill test, there was a goat carcass that yours cut in half, so the blade was pretty sharp. Good on the thrust, comfortable handle, and will kill. And Levi's performs about the same, cuts it in half, although I think his was like right away, cut it in half, right?
It cut
It
through.
was much sharper.
Yeah.
My inner curve, I couldn't sharpen on my belt sander. So I spent in pretty much the entirety of day 5 with a single whetstone, just filing at it, already heat treated. Like, the whetstone is a toothpick now. Like, it does not.
It was noted that he had the beautiful pommel at that snake's head, and it was sharp, scary, and will kill. And then we go on to the strength test, where it was basically a shield bash, and yours suffered a catastrophic fail on the 9th strike.
Which I was wondering, when are they going to stop hitting this shield? Like,
Yeah.
They just kept going. It was like, they're
Me
done.
too. Oh my God, that was one of the most intense things I've ever seen.
So
Beforehand, Jay had warned us, like, I had to drive here from Pennsylvania, and I was stuck in traffic for a while. Got a little bit of road rage to get out, so you guys are screwed.
All right, that dude's always got road rage. I mean,
Half Day J, they call him, right? Half Day J.
So what went through your head when yours broke?
Honestly, like, at first I was like, and then it was just relief. Like, it was over. I didn't have to worry about it anymore. Like, I knew what happened. And I was just like, yay, I don't have to think of this anymore.
you look like you're enjoying seeing the test, being performed.
The testing was probably my favorite part. Like, the ice chop and the shield chop were just so cool to watch. I was having a blast.
And then Levi's, they're like, okay, you have to make it past 9. He didn't make it past 1.
Yeah,
First strike, broke at the same spot. And so you won. Congratulations.
Yay.
Thank you.
Oh, I had a question. And I don't know if this is something you can answer. Just in general, the blades that the judges make for the round 3 reveal, do they put those through the same tests just to see that those tests can be done?
I have heard a lot of different things about this, and I've seen a lot of people talking about it on Facebook and stuff since. What I heard when I asked was, no, the final weapon is not tested, but the first and second round weapon is tested. and they purposely make the final weapon kind of vague and just like a representation, but they're not trying to give you any ideas with it. But I, again, don't have like a definitive answer on that, so I can only guess.
Yeah.
But what I've heard is no.
That's kind of crazy, because what if the weapon that Dave makes just breaks on like the first, or even halfway through a test, and they just know that the blades you guys bring are most likely to fail then, which is kind of...
There's also been other people that have said that some of the tests that they've picked for the finale weapons didn't make as much sense based on what the weapon was.
Right, like I was totally expecting them to do a throwing test, but they didn't do any throwing test.
Which, from my research, I did a lot of research on the weapon. It was very hard because it's kind of an obscure weapon. There was not much information on it at all out there. But they weren't really thrown. I actually kind of compared it to taking your cell phone wallet and throwing it at someone you don't like. Like, it was a very expensive weapon. It was one of the higher valued trading pieces, and they really were never used as weapons, and traditionally they're made out of wrought iron. So if you hit anything with it, it's just going to bend in half anyhow.
That's a totally different story than what they do on the show, or what they claim on the show, the backstory of it. So that's interesting.
It's interesting to research. I'd recommend it if you're ever interested in kind of a good ancient African read. But it was pretty cool to research.
Cool. So that was the episode, and we all got 2 points. You got $10,000. And what are your plans for that 10K?
Well, I've got I'm definitely going to upgrade the shop, is pretty much where it's going. I need to get more electricity out there so I can start welding and therefore make Damascus and such. And I also, a couple months ago, acquired a old 50-pound Little Giant power hammer that needs a lot of work. So the rest of it's probably going to go into parts for that. So going to actually kind of step it up a notch with my forging and try and turn this into a real business.
Nice.
Great.
Very
That's
nice.
Awesome. So when did you start, bladesmithing?
I started when I was 7 years old, but I kind of did other things throughout my teenage years, and recently got back to it full-time about 1.5 years ago. And that's just what I've been doing since.
Nice. What made you kind of get back into it? Were you just like, hey, I got this stuff hanging around, and let me just go back into it?
I just kind of started thinking about it more and more, and like I'd see knives and be like, oh, I can make that, or ooh, I want to make that, but with this or whatever. I got like a bunch of crazy ideas into my head for overcomplicated stuff that I wanted to make, and then ended up just completely falling back in love with it and haven't been able to put a hammer down since.
Nice. Did you already have that kind of shop there? Because that thing looks like an awesome structure to have set up. You got a lot of area workspace there.
Yeah, it's just the barn out by where we keep our sheep and such. We've had a wood shop there for a while, and then I slowly started kind of gathering metalworking equipment and finding room for it out there. And I've got a pretty sweet little shop set up now.
And it looks like it's a pretty open shop, right? I mean, I'm guaranteed where you live, the weather must stay pretty nice all year round. Yeah. But I have to imagine in the summertime it probably gets a little hot to work out there.
Oh yeah. During the challenge, actually, it was kind of late spring, early summer, and it was like our first good heat wave. So it was like 105 the whole time. Oh. And the ventilation really helps. And since then, it's only gotten hotter and drier. So I pretty much forge in shorts and no shoes, like as little as I can get away with, and fans blowing, and
yeah.
But
I
love it out here.
I saw one picture you posted. Actually, I think it was today, of your feet. I'm assuming that was from either after forging or at least walking around. But your feet were a very dark gray color.
Yep, that was after the day's work. Just washed them off after today.
Nice.
is there any particular blade style that you prefer to make?
Kind of the style I made in round 1 and 2. It's just kind of what I like. I like slight curves to kind of just add character to it, make it not necessarily normal. And since the episode, the Sengese is my favorite weapon of all time. I've just got 2 in the works out there. And actually, I've got it right here. I did get to keep the first one that melted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
So I have this as an awesome souvenir. And it's a fun weapon. Like when it's the one I made was really close to perfect in balance. I want to make one that's like right there, but swinging that thing is just a dream. And the little clinkle the ring makes is great too.
So everybody that we have on, we like to let them know that Sean and I are working on getting our own forge up and running. We are about this close to getting some stuff finalized, maybe. And we like to ask, what is a good beginner's tip that you would have for us, separate from taking a class? We've taken some class time. We did some blacksmithing. We did some work with Theo Naz, actually, in his shop. So beyond taking a class, what would you think is a good beginner's tip for us?
In some ways, I would say the exact opposite of use YouTube and the internet and everything sparingly and kind of figure it out for yourself a little bit. And then things happen like the paper towel thing or stuff that hasn't necessarily been done before. You can kind of forge your own path and you come up with new ideas from it. Don't let yourself get set into any specific way of doing things and have fun with it. It's the most fun you can have, if you ask me.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
It does.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, because everybody's constantly like, take a class. And we're like, we will. We took a class, but we just want to bang some freaking metal already.
And fire extinguishers are your friend.
Yes.
Safety.
Heat your quench oil. Get your quench oil at about 120 degrees before you quench. Makes it work so much better. And probably don't take my advice too strongly.
Keep the chickens away from the forge.
Yeah. My dogs drink the water I cool things off in like my grinder bucket. They just drink it. Can't stop them. Keep animals away from the forge.
Yeah.
You got any other questions, Sean?
There's probably something up there. I can't think of anything at the moment.
Was there anything you were hoping we would ask?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's
I don't
always
think
the
so.
stumper. Well, I think with that we can wrap it up. Thank you for coming on the show with us and going through the whole wrap-up with us. And congratulations again on your fine job there. That was really impressive. And, you keep at it, man. You reminded us of someone else that we interviewed when we first started the show, Drew Goodson.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see a lot of similarities between you guys. And I feel like somebody said this about Drew, and I feel like this could go for you as well. Like if you keep at it the way you're going, you could very easily be one of the top knife makers out there over a course of a couple of years. So, we like what you're doing, man. Keep up the good work. Thanks again for coming on with us. And right now, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to commission something?
Most of my presence is on Instagram. I've just kind of decided that's the easy one for me. And after the show, it's been Facebook, Instagram, everything. And switching between apps is the hardest thing ever, apparently. Even though it's really easy. So Instagram and email. My email is just my name @gmail. And I also sell my stuff on Etsy. So any of those work, and I'm around.
Great.
Awesome.
And we'll put some links in the description of this video, so if people happen to catch it, they can click through to there. And, I guess that's it. So, all right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right.